Here's the question. How do you make the impossible possible? Simple. Remove the I am, the ego. Now, how do you step into that newfound possibility? With a series of small intentional steps. Never forget, the greatest among us started from humble beginnings. But to truly unlock your potential, realize you're here for something greater. If you're yearning for more than just a good life, let's take that small step together to reach greatness. Welcome to the Greatness from Small Beginnings podcast, where we're talking to those who have gone from mediocrity to motivated, overlooked to overachieving, forgettable to unforgettable. Are you ready? Let's go. Well, hello, everybody. We are back, the Greatness from Small Beginnings podcast. Thank you for coming back and listening, and for those of you on YouTube for watching. Not that there's anything grand here to watch, that's for sure. I'm going to bounce around a little bit today. I'm sitting here by myself thinking, man, there's a message I need to share here. This first statement I've shared before on this podcast, and then expanded it. I don't remember which podcast it is, what it was. It's a quote by Albert Einstein, and I'm going to be looking at my notes on some of this because I'm bouncing around. He says, we cannot solve our problem with the same level of thinking that created them. So, put that in a little more accurate vernacular. We cannot solve our problems with the same levels of thinking that created all those problems. Albert Einstein, pretty smart guy. I think it was Albert Einstein. I watched a reel yesterday that Albert Einstein's mother got a note from school that she read to Albert when he got home. Take this to your mother. This is important for her, but take this to your mother. And she read him the note that said, Albert is a genius, and we're not capable of teaching him. And you need to figure out a different way to teach him and teach him yourself. And of course, then she did. She took control of the situation, took responsibility, which is, I believe, is part of our problem these days, is people don't take responsibility for themselves and the children that they've made, and the education and the behavior and all the things of all the children, which I believe is when I had kids, it was my responsibility to nurture all those things and to be in charge of those things. It ends up later on, after his mom died, Albert was going through the stuff, found that note, and he read that note. And actually, it didn't say, I don't remember the exact words, and I wish I did. It didn't say that Albert is a genius. It said that Albert has what we would call today learning disorders, and that we're not capable as a school to handle teaching him. So you'll have to find a different way of doing it. That's what the note actually said. But because she said to Albert and acknowledged that the school over there is saying you're a genius, so we're going to have to do it this way because they're not capable of getting you where, she energized him into basically being a genius when they thought he was like retarded, like not derogatorily retarded. Like, this is the term that was used back then. They thought he was challenged to the point of them not being capable to even teach him. Interesting. So that's the guy that wrote this. We cannot solve our problems with the same level of thinking that created them. And I believe that to be true. So here's where it fits with 5 random thoughts that I picked up from somewhere else. And some of them get a little personal and a little edgy. And that's, you know what, that's good. That's why I'm here. Random thought number 1. When you're committed to nothing,
you're distracted by everything. I am personally an example of that is that often I need to commit deeply, and I need to commit, which is kind of one of the last things that I will get to as I bounce around here after these 5 random thoughts. And I'm going to go some particular direction and get a little preachy at you. But when you're committed to nothing, a firm, solid commitment with a plan behind it, then you're distracted by everything and everything looks good. A lot of squirrels. But the idea is to not think the same. Commit to something, even if it's not exactly the right thing, even if it's only a high percentage of what you want. Commit to something so that you're not distracted. Back to Einstein saying, you can't solve the problem with the same kind of thinking that created the problems. So that means you have to overcome and do better. You have to grow and transform. Number 2, the first mountain a successful man must conquer is lust. Haven't struggled with porn and lust too much in my life. In my older years, especially because of the internet being right there in my hand all the time, it has been easier to get to and more distracting than I've ever had in my entire life. And I will tell you that my thinking on that, and again, this will relate to my last comments, to the last several comments that I make, is that this is a struggle for almost all men. And if it's not a struggle for them, uh, then I would say that at one point it was, and they built disciplines to hedge against it. I've heard people say, "Hey, raise your hand if you ever struggle with lust of or porn or anything like that." And some people, and they say, "Well, the people that didn't raise their hand are lying," because it's that prevalent in men's lives, and it's not unprevalent in women's either. It is there, and lust doesn't necessarily mean, it means lust of the eyes, which means it can mean I want something, I want money, I want things, I want to. Those are all lusts, and so we can get sucked into all of that. Number 3, if they, whoever they is, ban a book, it's wise to read it, because very likely embedded in there somewhere is some truth that hurts, truth that bothers somebody, the theys in the world that have a little bit of power. But the idea is to stay on the edge of new thinking. Solve your problems by thinking differently, thinking new, thinking beyond yourself, thinking, squelching your pride and ego, and thinking bigger. Not bigger in as in goals, but broader. And then random thought number 4, your greatest wisdom comes from your greatest pain. And that is, isn't that true? That our failures are the thing that teaches us most. Our frustrations are the things that create conflict, which in essence create growth. I was just on a call with somebody earlier, and they were explaining this, that change in life is inevitable, creates conflict, and he put it in a pyramid. On one side, you have change, which is constant. If you're not changing, then you're dying. And part of that change is dealing with conflict, whether it's with people or yourself or your body. Your body's changing, and you got to deal with the conflict of the fact that you're getting older and things are breaking. Things are not doing what they used to do. And then the top of the pyramid that we were talking about was growth. What comes out of those things is growth. So your greatest wisdom comes from your greatest pain, and that is really true. I have a time in my life, a little over 2 years, about 10 years ago, where there was so much pain, and I've learned a lot since then, especially about myself, as I was able to reflect back on what happened and why, and how did I get where I was in the situation? Because I didn't actually cause most of it, but ended up frustrated and bitter and angry, and have had to recover basically from all of that. And I'm still in a process of getting through that. Your wisdom comes from your greatest pain. So don't allow yourself to be pain resistant, like pushing pain away. Not you go begging for it maybe, but don't push it away. Realize that it's part of your growth and you get wisdom out of that. Random thought number 5. It's a little bit different than the others. Cash is not trash, despite what the talking heads on Facebook and other places tell you, that debt and encumbrance, are the thing that they're traps. Okay. So then they reference in that statement Warren Buffett, who is a real advocate for a very balanced approach to debt and making money. Okay. Well, he's not the god of the world, and yet he's a pretty wise man when it comes to finances. And so we should get examples like that in our life. So that being said, we can be indebted and go back to what it says in the first one of these random thoughts. When you're committed to nothing, you're distracted by everything. If you're not committed to being debt free so that you have freedom, you end up distracted by the fact that now you are in debt. And that is all those things are super negative. So, random thought number 5, cash is good. Now, the reason for the cash is basically to have debt, to be debt free, and debt free creates freedom. I was just talking to somebody I'm close to, and they're planning on moving, selling their house, moving, and it looks like they may be able to take a couple $100,000 with them in this move. That they may be able to sell their house and put that money into their decision is, do they keep the cash and buy a house or rent, or buy a house and put all of that cash into that house so that debt load is lower, so that they have the freedom not to have to work like crazy once they get to this new location, because only one of them currently has a job that they're working on in that new location. So they could live on less if they eliminate as they move in, basically keep a little cash to live on, of course, but they eliminate the debt so that they have the freedom to take time to figure out how they're going to live life. Interesting thought, interesting. It's a wise way to think. Is there's a balance somewhere between, let's pay the mortgage on this new place down so that I don't have to deal with the debt uh, load monthly, and then I can live with a lot more freedom. So anyway, just some great random thoughts. Now here's where I'm going next, that related so much to some of these, and then it relates to some degree all of them. I heard a reel on Instagram that was basically about, and I've heard it before, but I stopped for a minute and just kind of wrote down some of the statistics about when a person reads the Bible. So back to the thinking, we can't solve our problems with the same level of thinking that created them. So where do we get new thinking? Where's the ultimate best possible place to get new thinking? In my opinion, it's from the wisest person in the world, the one that created me, the one that created the world, from God himself. And the way we get that is from the Bible, from scripture. And this guy in this reel that I was watching said that if a person reads the Bible 2 times a week, that it actually changes almost nothing in their behaviors and their way of thinking. And 3 times a week, there's just a little blip, like they somehow use some data to figure out, is this actually helping? And 3 times a week, there's a little blip of improvement, but very little. But those that read the Bible 4 times a week, he said it's a marked difference. He said it's odd because it should have been a progression from 2 to 3. It should have gone up a little, and then 3 to 4. It should have gone up from 1 all the way up to 4. But 4 is the key. 4 times a week. So this might seem like a random thought, but I'm going to relate it back to these things that I mentioned earlier. Well, I can relate it to all of them. When you read the Bible, and I don't even think it has to be that much. My story is that I open the book and I read something every day of my life. I've been doing it for 33 years. And I've missed maybe 100 days in 33 years. But now it's such a habit that my day is not done until I've done it. And thank goodness, thank God I'm there. And it didn't take all 33 years to get to that point, but I enjoy it now. I want the wisdom of God in my life. And it's 7 days a week for me. And that's what I knew I needed. So we have to, but the data is amazing. 4 times a week, feeling lonely dropped 30%. Tendency towards alcoholism or alcoholism itself dropped 57%. The stagnant feeling of relationship in general, but relationship with God in particular, dropped 60%. Viewing pornography and things we shouldn't be viewing dropped 61%. Anger, bitterness, frustration dropped 32%. And this, again, this is almost immediate. As soon as you hit a consistent 4 times a week for a while, for a little while, it drops immediately. And on the positive side, sharing your faith, talking about God openly, based on the confidence that you now have, it went up 200%. Discipling or mentoring people in that role of adding wisdom to other people's lives went up 230%. And this is all based on being in Scripture 4 times a week. Now, how does that relate to these random thoughts? When you're committed to nothing, you're distracted by everything. Man, how does that fit? So if I commit to, let's say 5 days a week, every day, I put it in my morning routine for my 5 days a week, my work days, and I consistently do the 5 days a week because it's in my routine. Maybe it's not morning, maybe it's evening. For me, for years, it was evening. Then I'm less distracted by everything else because I've committed to something. I plant the ideas in my head of wisdom and I think wisdom thoughts. And then random thought number 2, where it talks about the first mountain for a successful man to conquer is lust. And that is actually mentioned as one of the things that very shortly after doing the 4 times a week, pornography, the tendency towards pornography or viewing pornography or the things that we shouldn't view goes down 60%. Amazing. Anger goes down. Random thought number 3, if they ban a book, you should read it. I have read many books recently or listened to many books recently. The sad part is that I had to buy them and I didn't like that. But I've read a lot of books that I disagreed with. Had a conversation recently with one of my younger family members, and he mentioned a book, and I'm like, ooh, I didn't like that book. Oh, why? I said, well, because it's not the right way to think about things. And he said, well, that's true, but doesn't that stimulate us then to figure out how we're supposed to think? And he was not wrong. I did commit to finishing the book. Don't think I have yet. But it is, I'll tell you the book, but believe me, don't buy in. It's like the 48 laws of power. And some of them are so manipulative and horrible that I can't imagine them being the way God would want me to live, especially if I'm reading scripture. I have to counteract those ideas, many of them with scripture. There is truth in them, because if you want power, there's certain ways you do it. But, and then God's thinking about that. Speaking of Albert Einstein, we can't solve our problem by the same level of thinking that created the problem. It's better to have God's thinking so that the problems actually get solved. So then on random thought number 4, your greatest wisdom comes from your greatest pain. Isn't that true? And aren't we after wisdom? And yes, my greatest wisdom has come from my greatest pain, but it was partly because I was crying out to God, I need your answers. And because of that, consistently going to scripture, I was able to get answers a lot more often, more than 4 days a week, because I really needed it. And so if we want wisdom, especially in times of pain, that is the answer, is get in scripture. And then talking about the random thought number 5, the cash, the being out of debt and all that stuff. Scripture is full of those kind of wise thoughts, and would highly recommend using scripture and the teaching of scripture, the teachers that teach scriptural principles, to kind of solidify how you think, even about money, about prosperity, about poverty, about prosperity mindset versus poverty mindset. And man, there's a real dichotomy there, especially in the Christian world, which is, to me, is very frustrating. But money is important, and most of the parables, over 2/3 of them, are about money or possessions in one way or another. And so they are important. It is an important thing. But the main thing is, the main place I'm going with today, as I tie up these random thoughts, is the only option you have to advance, to move your wisdom forward, to be to be the person you're supposed to be, to transform based on the wisdom that's being inputted into your heart, soul, and mind, is through scripture. More than at least 4 times a week, 4 or more. And would highly recommend that you get a Bible app. I was amazed. I was asked to do a quick seminar thing on faith in business this weekend, this Friday, this upcoming week. And what I noticed, because of in my Bible app, there was scripture coming through every day, a certain one, and three out of the last 6 scriptures tie exactly into what I want to say. And it's just interesting how that continues to work in our lives. Those of us who read scripture a lot, it ties into what's going on. So not only should I highly recommend it, but do I highly recommend it, but I think it's actual survival in this crazy world we live in. Seeing things the way we should see them, and with wisdom, with a full picture, and with the right full picture. That is key, is getting the wisdom from the right source, which is God. And it's all over in scripture. And then I decided that, okay, what's the wisest man in the world? Well, God says it was Solomon. And Solomon wrote many of the Proverbs. And so if you want something simple and a good way to start, that is it. Go to the Proverbs every day. Read a whole proverb, read a half, read a third, read 5 verses, and ruminate on those things. And you'll always find something to chew on, something healthy, and something that'll change you just a little bit in the right direction. 4 or more days a week in the Bible. Well, there you go. So what I'm talking about here is how you can be greatness from small beginnings, and we all start small, and we all want to be great the way God intended us to be. Zig Ziglar said, "You were designed for accomplishment, engineered for success, and endowed with the seeds of greatness." It's up to us to choose how to use them. And the best way to accomplish being all we can be, get in the Bible, get in scripture 4+ days a week. Now, call to action. This is the road to greatness. Now go be great.